Time now for Media Watch with Emma James. Hi, Emma. Good to see you. And as the US tries to shake up NATO, you've been looking at some others who've questioned the future of this historic alliance.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people were very shocked when Donald Trump dismissed NATO as obsolete back in January, but it does seem there are others who agree that things need to change. If we take a look at this article from the Daily Telegraph, the British newspaper, it's been written by two people, one who's a former national security advisor to the Spanish government, the other a former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. And they believe that Trump is right, that NATO is verging on being obsolete. They say for 5 decades, NATO was necessary to, as its first Secretary General said very famously, keep the Soviets out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. But they say that times change and that it is now the moment for revamp and reform. The fundamental issue that NATO is yet to address is the threat of ISIS, and they say Trump might even be the man to actually make NATO relevant again. Taking a look back in time to June 2011, and the Defence Secretary then was Robert Gates, and what he said, he was warning of a very dim future for NATO. They said it was dim at best, dismal at worst. He blamed shortages in military spending and a lack of political will, and said that member nations really needed to scale up their participation in the alliance, all sounding very familiar to what Donald Trump and his administration have been asking for. So maybe it's not quite as shocking as we first thought.
OK, well, the fallout from the resignation of the US National Security Advisor is still a subject of fascination, and it's made Michael Flynn the butt of a few jokes stateside. Tell us more.
Yes, absolutely. US comedy right now is very much focused on politics, more so than ever. And it isn't just Saturday Night Live. Stephen Colbert is actually winning more viewers than pretty much ever before, according to the Washington Post, thanks to his focus on Trump and being largely anti-Trump, it has to be said. Last night, he ripped into the newly defrocked Michael Flynn about his apparent lack of awareness that his calls and contacts with Russia would be monitored. Let's take a listen.
After it was revealed there were recordings of his conversation, Flynn went from absolutely not to he couldn't be certain that the topic never came up. I know one way you could be certain. As the National Security Advisor, you could ask for the transcript. Could I see that, please? Oh. I should really not have this job. It's funny because it's treason.
There you go. Great stuff from Stephen Colbert. The reaction from Donald Trump is, as you might expect, of course, coming on Twitter in reaction to the crisis within the security services. And what he has to say is the real scandal here is that classified information is illegally given out by intelligence like candy, very un-American. He then went on to say this: information is being illegally given to the failing New York Times and the Washington Post by the intelligence community, just like Russia. But if we take a look at the Daily Beast, what they point out, and which is certainly true right now, the New York Times and the Washington Post really are setting the news agenda right now with their scoops and their very diligent journalism. And they say in this article, the journalism empire strikes back. Now, of course, the Trump administration has painted the media as the opposition party. It's all fake news. And they say that it's basically an attempt to delegitimize what is key to a democracy. And they're trying to control the version of reality that's being sold to US citizens. But this writer says they're now having to confront one fact in the Trump administration, that journalists really do matter. Because, of course, the US president, we now know, was aware of what Michael Flynn had done, but he was only prompted to call for his resignation once those facts became known to the public, thanks to the Washington Post. Now, interestingly, one question here from David Korn, a journalist in the US, is if Flynn was a victim of the fake media, which is something that Donald Trump has been saying today, why did you fire him? And it is a very good question to ask.
Indeed. Finally, Emma, some spoof French news was in danger of causing something of an international incident.
Yes, it is fake news, but it started out as joke news, but somebody thought that it was real news. A little bit confusing, but basically there was a story that Marine Le Pen wanted to build a wall around France and she was planning to ask Algeria to pay for it. What happened is that people then in Algeria thought it was real. Now, this is what the spoof website looks like, Le Gorafi. You'll see it's an anagram of Le Figaro, obviously a very famous French news outlet. And the Algerians saw this, and it was picked up in particular by El Hayat, which is an Algerian daily, but others too. And if we take a look, it's actually made the front page news.
Wow.
Really very unfortunate for them. As you see on their website now, you get error 404 because they've now removed it from their website, but it does still exist on their Facebook page, where people are leaving outraged comments because of this idea that Algeria should pay for a wall. And of course, it does have echoes of Donald Trump's Mexican border wall. Le Gorafi has managed to fool people in the past. This is their website. It does look quite convincing. If something's shared via Facebook or Twitter and you don't go to the website, you just look at one article, it does look credible. But where they caught people out before was in 2013. They came up with a very saucy story about Italian men's inadequacies in the bedroom. Claiming that 89% of Italian men didn't know about a certain part of a woman's anatomy and actually thought it was a car made by Toyota. That was then picked up by 6 different Italian news outlets.
Wow.
So it just goes to show you can fool some of the people all of the time.
All righty, Emma, thank you very much for that. Emma James there with Media Watch.